I was lying in the ICU staring at my phone screen showing 17 missed outgoing calls and 0 incoming ones. A few hours earlier, a truck had slammed into my car on the highway and doctors told me I almost died. I had called my parents desperately while they were rushing me into emergency surgery, but nobody answered. Later, I found out why. My sister Hortense was crying hysterically because someone delivered the wrong shade of green paint for her wedding backdrop. That moment became the final straw after 32 years of living in her shadow. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. What I am about to share might change how you think about family sacrifice and knowing when enough is enough. Growing up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy, and it was never at the top. My father, Gerald, now 58 years old, worked as a manager at a steel plant. He was a strict man with calloused hands and a voice that could silence a room, yet somehow my sister could make him melt with a single pout. My mother, Diane, 55, had been a homemaker her entire adult life. Her world revolved around keeping the household running smoothly, which in practice meant keeping Hortense happy at all costs. Hortense was 4 years younger than me. She came into this world 6 weeks premature, tiny and fragile, fighting for her life in a neonatal unit for the first 3 weeks of her existence. When she was 3 years old, she caught a severe case of pneumonia that hospitalized her for nearly a month. Those early struggles cemented something in my parents' minds. Hortense was delicate. Hortense needed protection. Hortense came first. I understood it when I was young. I really did. What kind of brother would resent his baby sister for being sick? So I learned to step aside to make myself smaller, to need less. I became the easy child, the one who never caused problems, the one who figured things out on his own. When I was 12 years old, I won first place in the state science fair. I had spent 4 months building a working model of a water filtration system, staying up late every night, teaching myself concepts that were years ahead of my grade level. The award ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon, and I remember standing on that stage scanning the audience for my parents' faces. They were not there. Hortense had woken up with a slight fever that morning, nothing serious, probably just a cold, but my mother refused to leave her side and my father stayed home to help. I accepted my trophy alone, smiled for the photograph, and told myself it was fine. She was sick. They had to stay. At 16, I got my first job, bagging groceries at the local supermarket. I worked every weekend and most weekday evenings, saving every dollar I earned. After 8 months, I had accumulated enough to buy a decent used bicycle, something I desperately needed since my parents could not always drive me to my after-school activities. I had $420 saved hidden in a shoebox under my bed. One evening, I came home to find the shoebox empty. My mother explained that Hortense had been accepted into an elite ballet summer camp, and they needed the money for the registration fee. They promised to pay me back. They never did. The pattern continued through high school and into college. I worked multiple jobs, earned scholarships, and graduated with a degree in software engineering, the first person in my family to earn a professional degree. My graduation ceremony was supposed to be a milestone, a moment of pride. My parents arrived 45 minutes late. When they finally found their seats, my name had already been called. I had walked across that stage alone, just like at the science fair, just like always. The reason for their tardiness, Hortense had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend of the month and needed emotional support. Apparently, her heartbreak could not wait 2 hours. My mother's response to any complaint I raised was always the same. You are a strong young man. Your sister is more sensitive. You need to understand and be patient with her. After hearing those words hundreds of times over the years, I stopped complaining. I stopped expecting anything different. Meanwhile, Hortense grew into exactly the kind of person you would expect from someone who had never been told no. She was 28 years old, beautiful in that effortless way that made people forgive her everything, and completely incapable of handling any form of adversity. She had cycled through at least 7 jobs since graduating from college, quitting each one because the work was too hard, or her boss was too mean, or her coworkers did not appreciate her. My parents supplemented her income without question, ensuring she never had to face the consequences of her choices. Her romantic life followed a similar pattern. 3 serious relationships, 3 dramatic endings, and each time she emerged convinced that she was the victim. The men were always at fault. She was always blameless. My parents agreed wholeheartedly every single time. 8 months before my accident, Hortense got engaged to Derek, a mild-mannered bank employee who seemed genuinely in love with her. I liked Derek. He was quiet, hardworking, and patient qualities he would certainly need if he was going to marry my sister. The engagement sent my mother into a frenzy of wedding planning that consumed every family conversation from that point forward. Color schemes, venue options, flower arrangements, dress fittings. It was all anyone talked about when we gathered for dinners or holidays. 3 months before the wedding, my mother informed me that I would be contributing $15,000 toward the celebration. Not asked, informed. She explained that Hortense and Derek were on a tight budget and family needed to help family. I had just purchased my first home, a modest 2-bedroom house that needed significant repairs, and I was stretching every paycheck to cover the mortgage and necessary renovations. $15,000 would mean postponing fixing the heating system, which meant a cold winter ahead. But I said yes. I always said yes. I transferred the money the day before my accident. I remember looking at my bank balance afterward, seeing how much I had sacrificed once again for a sister who had never sacrificed anything for me, and feeling that familiar resignation settle into my chest. This was just how things were. This was my role in the family. I had accepted it long ago. That Saturday morning in October, I woke up early to prepare for a drive to Cleveland. A client needed an urgent consultation on their software system, and the freelance fee would help offset some of the financial strain from the wedding contribution. The autumn air in Pittsburgh had turned crisp, and I could see my breath as I loaded my laptop bag into the car. Before leaving, I checked my phone and found a text message from my mother. It was a reminder to confirm that I had transferred the wedding money, followed by a note that Hortense was stressed about the seating arrangements, and could I please be flexible about where I sat during the reception. I typed back a confirmation that the money had been sent, then called her to let her know I would be traveling for work. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice distracted. "Yes, honey, that is great. Thank you for the money." "Listen, I have to go. Your sister is calling on the other line. Something about the florist. Drive safe." The line went dead before I could say goodbye. The drive to Cleveland usually takes about 2 hours on Interstate 76. I had made the trip dozens of times over the years for various work commitments. That day, traffic was light and I was making good time. I remember thinking about stopping for coffee at a rest area, then deciding to push through and grab some once I arrived. I never made it to Cleveland. At approximately 3:15 in the afternoon, I was cruising in the middle lane at about 65 miles per hour. I noticed a semi-truck in my rearview mirror moving faster than the flow of traffic, weaving slightly. Before I could react, the truck crossed into my lane. I heard the scream of metal against metal, felt my car spin violently, and then the world turned upside down. Literally. My car flipped twice before coming to rest on its roof in the highway median. The next few minutes exist in my memory only as fragments. The smell of gasoline, the taste of blood in my mouth, the weight of the steering column pressing against my chest, the sound of voices shouting in the distance. I could not move my left leg, and every breath sent sharp pain radiating through my torso. I managed to get my phone out of my pocket. The screen was cracked but still functional. I dialed my parents' number. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I called my mother directly. No answer. I called my father. Nothing. Emergency responders arrived and extracted me from the wreckage. I was loaded into an ambulance, and through the haze of pain and fear, I kept trying to reach my family. The paramedic who was monitoring my vitals asked if there was anyone they should contact. I gave him my parents' numbers and asked him to keep trying. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Doctors surrounded me, speaking in urgent tones about internal bleeding, fractured ribs, a compound fracture in my left leg. They needed to operate immediately. A nurse helped me make a few more calls before they took me to surgery. 5 calls to my parents. 5 times no one answered. The nurse left voicemails on both numbers, explaining that their son was in critical condition and undergoing emergency surgery at UPMC Presbyterian Hospital. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was staring at the ceiling of the operating room and wondering if I would wake up, and if I did, whether anyone would be there. I woke up in the intensive care unit at around 10:30 that night. My body was a landscape of pain tubes and bandages. A nurse noticed me stirring and came to check my vitals. She explained that the surgery had gone well, that they had stopped the internal bleeding and repaired the damage to my leg. I would need physical therapy, but I was expected to make a full recovery. The first question I asked her was whether my family had arrived. She checked the visitor log and shook her head. No one had come. No one had even called back. I looked at my phone on the bedside table. 17 outgoing calls, 0 incoming, not a single text message. The hours between 10:30 at night and midnight stretched like years. I lay in that hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily beside me, and I felt something crack open inside my chest that had nothing to do with my broken ribs. The physical pain was almost a relief because at least it distracted me from the realization that was slowly taking shape in my mind. My family did not come because they did not know how serious it was, I told myself. But the nurse had left detailed voicemails. They knew. They just did not care enough to come. At 11:42, my phone finally rang. My heart leaped at the sight of my mother's name on the screen. I answered immediately. Her voice came through breathless and harried. "Honey, I saw you called. Is everything okay? I am so sorry I missed your calls. It has been absolute chaos here." "Mom, I was in a car accident. I am in the ICU. I had surgery a few hours ago," I said, my voice weaker than I intended. I heard her gasp, but before she could respond, a wailing sound erupted in the background. Hortense. I could hear her sobbing dramatically, her voice rising and falling in that theatrical way she had perfected over the years. "Oh my goodness," my mother said, but her attention was clearly split. "Hold on, sweetheart. Hortense, honey, please try to calm down. I know the backdrop is ruined." She came back to me. "I am so sorry. What were you saying? An accident?" "I am in the ICU, Mom. I almost died. They had to do emergency surgery." Another burst of crying from Hortense. I heard my father's voice in the background trying to soothe her. "That sounds terrible, honey, but you are okay now, right? Listen, I really need to handle this situation. Your sister is completely falling apart. The company that was supposed to deliver the painted backdrop for the wedding sent the wrong color. She ordered sage green and they sent mint green. She says the entire aesthetic is ruined. She has been crying for hours and she will not eat anything." I could not speak. I literally could not form words. "I will call you back as soon as things calm down here, okay? We will figure out when we can come visit. Love you." She hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. Sage green, mint green. My sister was having a nervous breakdown over a shade of paint, and that took priority over her brother lying in an intensive care unit after nearly dying. Something shifted inside me at that moment. It was not anger, though. Anger was certainly part of it. It was more like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, revealing a picture I had refused to see for 32 years. I was not a son to these people. I was not a brother. I was a supporting character in a story that had never been about me. I picked up my phone again, but this time I did not call my parents. I called Marcus, my best friend since our freshman year of college. Marcus and I had been through everything together: late-night study sessions, bad breakups, job losses, celebrations, and disappointments. He lived in Columbus now, about 2 hours away, and I hated to disturb him so late. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy but alert. "Hey man, everything okay?" I told him everything. The accident, the surgery, the 17 unanswered calls, the conversation with my mother about sage green versus mint green. By the end, I was not sure if I was laughing or crying, maybe both. "I am on my way," Marcus said without hesitation. "I will be there by 1. "You do not have to do that. It is late. I just needed to talk to someone." "Shut up. I will be there by 1. He arrived at 12:53. I know because I watched the clock the entire time, needing something concrete to focus on. When he walked through the door of my room wearing a hastily thrown-on jacket over what were clearly pajama pants, I felt something loosen in my chest. Here was someone who cared. Here was proof that I was worth a 2-hour drive in the middle of the night. Marcus pulled a chair up to my bed and took my hand. "I am here, man. I am right here." I told him the full story, then, not just the accident and the calls, but everything. The science fair, the bicycle money, the graduation, the $15,000 I had just given for a wedding that seemed to matter more than my life. 32 years of swallowing my needs, my disappointments, my pain, all for a family that would choose backdrop colors over my survival. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You need a lawyer," he finally said. Why I am not going to sue my family. Not to sue them, to protect yourself, to make decisions for your future without them in it. You almost died tonight and no one from your family showed up. What if you had died? What if you had been in a coma and they needed to make medical decisions? These are the people who would have been in charge. The thought had not occurred to me, but once he said it, I could not unthink it. My parents were listed as my emergency contacts. They would have had the power to make decisions about my care, about my life. "I know someone," Marcus continued. "Patricia Thornton. She specializes in estate planning and medical directives. She is actually a friend. Let me call her in the morning. She can come to the hospital." "It is Sunday tomorrow. She will not want to work on a Sunday." Marcus smiled grimly. "She will for this. Trust me." True to his word, Marcus called Patricia first thing in the morning and she arrived at the hospital by 10. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an efficient manner, the kind of person who made you feel like everything would be handled. She listened to my story with professional composure, though I caught a flicker of something like anger when I described the phone call with my mother. "Here is what we can do," she said, opening her briefcase. "First, we change your healthcare proxy. Remove your parents and designate someone you trust to make medical decisions if you are incapacitated. I assume that would be Marcus." I nodded. "Second, we update your will. You mentioned you just bought a house and you have some savings. Right now, if anything happened to you, your assets would likely go to your closest living relatives. We can change that." I thought about my house, the one I had stretched to afford the one I was living in, without proper heating, because I had given $15,000 to fund a wedding celebration. I thought about my savings account slowly rebuilt after years of being drained for Hortense's needs. "Change it," I said. "Everything goes to Marcus and to charity. My family gets nothing." Patricia nodded and began preparing the documents. As I signed each one, I felt a strange combination of grief and liberation. Grief for the family relationship I had always wanted but never had. Liberation from the endless cycle of giving without receiving. "One more thing," I said as Patricia gathered the completed paperwork. "The $15,000 I transferred for the wedding. Is there any way to get it back?" She checked with my bank over the phone. Because the transfer had occurred within the last 72 hours and had not yet been fully processed, it could be recalled. I authorized the reversal immediately. "I want you to send a formal letter to my parents," I told Patricia, informing them of all these changes, the healthcare proxy, the will, the canceled contribution. She made a note. "I can have that delivered by tomorrow." When she left, Marcus looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. "How do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. "Like something broke," I finally said, "but also like something finally got fixed." My parents and Hortense arrived at the hospital on Sunday afternoon, nearly 48 hours after my accident. I was dozing lightly when I heard a commotion at the nurse's station. Someone was arguing, their voice sharp with indignation. I recognized my mother's tone immediately. A nurse came to my room a few minutes later. "Mr. Richardson, there are 3 people at the front desk claiming to be your family. They are not on your approved visitor list. Would you like me to send them away?" "Let them in," I said. My mother entered first, her face arranged in an expression of concern that did not quite reach her eyes. She looked tired and irritated, probably from the hassle of being stopped at the front desk. My father followed, his jaw tight, his eyes sweeping the room and taking in the monitors, the bandages, the cast on my leg. Hortense came last, still in what appeared to be designer loungewear, her eyes puffy from crying that had nothing to do with me. "Oh, honey," my mother breathed, moving toward my bed. "We had no idea it was this serious. When you said accident, I thought you meant a fender bender or something. Why did you not tell me you were really hurt?" I looked at her steadily. "I told you I was in the ICU. I told you I had surgery." She waved her hand dismissively. "Everything sounds dramatic these days. People go to the ICU for all sorts of minor things now. How was I supposed to know?" My father spoke for the first time. "You should have called us again, made sure we understood." I called 17 times, I said quietly. No one answered. We were dealing with your sister's crisis, my mother said, as if this explained everything, as if it justified everything. The wedding is in 3 months. Do you have any idea how much stress she is under? Hortense finally spoke up. It is not just about the backdrop, you know. The whole color scheme is based on sage green. If the backdrop is wrong, then the flowers look wrong, and the bridesmaids' dresses clash, and the photos will be ruined. You do not understand because you have never planned anything important in your life. I let her words wash over me without reacting. There was a time when a comment like that would have stung, would have reinforced my belief that I was somehow less than that my accomplishments did not matter. Now it just felt like noise. I have something for you to read, I said, reaching for the envelope on my bedside table. Patricia had provided me with a copy of all the documents I had signed. I handed the papers to my father. He took the envelope with a confused expression and began to read. I watched his face change as he processed the information. The healthcare proxy removing him and my mother. The new will leaving them nothing. The canceled wedding contribution. What is this? He demanded, his voice rising. What have you done? What I should have done a long time ago, I replied. I have spent 32 years trying to earn a place in this family, trying to be good enough, patient enough, selfless enough. I have given my money, my time, my emotional energy, and none of it was ever enough. I was in surgery, potentially dying, while you stayed home to comfort Hortense about paint colors. That told me everything I needed to know about where I stand. My mother snatched the papers from my father's hands, scanning them rapidly. You cannot do this. We are your family. Family does not abandon family. You abandoned me in this hospital for 48 hours. You abandoned me at my science fair when I was 12. You abandoned me at my graduation. You have been abandoning me my entire life. I am just finally accepting it. Hortense's face had gone pale as she processed the implications. Wait, what about the wedding money? You said you transferred it. I recalled the transfer. You cannot do that. We already allocated that money. We have deposits due. Derek and I had a whole budget planned around your contribution. Her voice was rising to that familiar hysterical pitch. You are ruining my wedding. You are ruining the most important day of my life because you are jealous and petty and you have always resented me. I am not ruining anything. I am simply no longer funding it. You can have the wedding you can afford like most people do. My mother reached for my hand, her expression shifting to something that might have been genuine distress. Sweetheart, please, let us talk about this. We can work things out. I know we have not always gotten the balance right between you and your sister, but we love you. We are family. You cannot just cut us out. I pulled my hand away. You cut me out years ago. I am just making it official. The conversation went in circles for another 20 minutes. My mother pleaded. My father threatened. Hortense alternated between crying and hurling accusations. Through it all, I remained calm. Not cold, not cruel, just finally at peace with a decision that had been 32 years in the making. Eventually, a nurse came to check on me and suggested that I needed rest. I agreed and my family was escorted out. As they reached the door, Hortense turned back one final time. You are going to regret this, she said. When you are all alone with no family, you are going to realize what you threw away. Maybe, I acknowledged, but I would rather be alone and valued by the people I choose than surrounded by family and constantly reminded that I am not enough. The door closed behind them. I spent 2 more weeks in the hospital recovering from my injuries and beginning the long process of physical therapy. Marcus visited every single day, sometimes driving 4 hours round trip just to sit with me for a few hours. Patricia stopped by twice more to finalize paperwork and check that everything was in order. A few colleagues sent flowers and cards. My mother texted me regularly during those 2 weeks. The messages followed a predictable pattern. First came apologies, vague and conditional, sorry if I felt neglected, sorry if there had been misunderstandings. Then came guilt trips, reminders of everything they had done for me, accusations that I was being ungrateful and dramatic. Then came pleas to reconsider promises that things would be different, assurances that they loved me and wanted me in their lives. Then the cycle would repeat. I did not respond to any of them. After I was discharged, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and childhood emotional neglect. The first few sessions were brutal, forcing me to confront patterns and wounds I had spent decades suppressing. But slowly, something began to shift. I started to understand that my worth was not determined by my usefulness to others. I started to believe that I deserved love and attention not as a reward for sacrifice, but simply because I existed. 6 months after the accident, I received news through a mutual acquaintance that Hortense had postponed her wedding. Apparently, she and Derek had gotten into a massive fight about finances once my contribution was canceled. Derek had expected the wedding to be scaled back accordingly. Hortense had expected him to cover the shortfall. Neither was willing to compromise, and the relationship had begun to fracture under the strain. I felt nothing when I heard this news. No satisfaction, no vindication, no sadness. The wedding, the money, the drama, it all belonged to a life I no longer lived. I had built something new for myself, a family of friends who showed up when it mattered, a career that I found fulfilling, a home that was finally properly heated after I used some of the money I had intended for the wedding to fix my furnace. I have not spoken to my parents or Hortense since that day in the hospital. The door is not closed forever. Maybe someday there could be a different kind of relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than my endless sacrifice. But that day is not today, and it might not come at all. I have made peace with that. Sometimes the last straw is not a burden, it is a gift. It gives you permission to finally set down the weight you have been carrying and walk away. If you are in a relationship where you constantly have to earn love that should be given freely, where your emergencies are always less important than someone else's inconveniences, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve people who answer when you call. You deserve to be someone's priority, not their afterthought. I want to thank you for staying with me through this story. It was not easy to share, but I hope it helped someone out there who needed to hear it. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family who took you for granted? How did you find the strength to put yourself first? Drop your experiences in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need this message today. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you do not miss future stories. Remember, you are worthy of love and respect exactly as you are. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.